For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Morning, Jens. Off very, very slightly, but the Nikkei isn't. The Nikkei is still round about those 13-year highs. The reason for that is the fact that the Bank of Japan is maintaining its relatively ultra-loose monetary policy. And it's expected that to continue. In fact, the Nikkei, I can tell you now, 33-year highs still. And people are looking at Japan and wondering whether or not they ought to be investing there. Meantime, Goldman Sachs, I only mention this because it's a leading American bank, has joined other American banks by reducing its forecast for China. Instead of 6% growth this year, they've downgraded it to 5.4% growth. Now, again, this is not massive for the rest of the world, because the rest of the world would very much like those kind of growth figures. But China, of course, exceeds that. But for Goldman Sachs to mark it down, I'm just saying that they're joining in with the rest of the crew. Meantime, Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, is meeting President Xi in China. Again, the reason for mentioning that is he is the highest level diplomat after Biden got into the White House as President of the United States, Joe Biden. He's the highest ranking figure to meet the Chinese leader there. What they'll talk about, no idea, but it's felt that this is somehow warming up the freeze between the two countries. China itself, again, we look to the consumer there, don't we? And they've had their big shopping weekend. Apparently, they did snap up some bargains on JD.com and Alibaba and the rest of them, but generally speaking, spending still slightly down. So the China venture capitalists are looking to the Middle East for investment as the rest of the world sort of cools to them. As far as the United States concerned, a holiday today, the Juneteenth holiday, which will mean there'll be no stock market today. But I'm going to bring you news about Tesla and about Twitter. Tesla, first of all, saying that Musk is not quite sure whether a company valued at $827 billion, why its share price goes up and down, but it may be to do with whether or not they're developing their self-driving mechanism. Meantime, Twitter, you'll remember that Twitter got a new CEO, Linda Yaccarino, who was brought in by Elon Musk, is now saying that it's going to have joint partnerships with news-gathering organizations and also companies themselves. It's going to create, it's going to be joining in with what it terms creator and commerce participants. That's what's being promised there. The EU now, top officials there are saying that it's about time that the EU was involved, became an internal market for AI. But before that happens, the Internal Market Commissioner, Thierry Breton, has been saying that more countries should ban Huawei and ZTC. Tying in with the theme of artificial intelligence, I told you on Friday that President Macron of France is trying to make France a centre. We've got a very high-profile bid now to make France the centre of the AI advances. We want to be number one in artificial intelligence. He's saying he recognizes it's having an enormous amount of strategic importance. That came out at the annual tech conference in France, which is called Viva Tech, which is the country's largest exhibition there. EU Paris Air Show, again, something I mentioned last week. Boeing and Airbus are racing now to increase production. The orders are expected to pour in from Turkish, United, Ryanair have already ordered. The new Middle East airline from Saudi, Riyadh Air, Delta, Malaysia, Air France stroke KLM, all these people now trying to get on the back of the Paris Air Show and the rise in air travel. UK now, and AstraZeneca wants to spin off its part of its China business as a result of. Now, there's no figures attached to this. The company have said they never comment on things like this, but it's clear from all the comment coming up that they are clearly mulling something like this. They are. Astra is the biggest foreign pharmaceutical company in China, so there may be something in there. In the UK, staying with this country, and it's a big week for interest rates this week. Bank of England announces its decision on Thursday. We'll get inflation figures too. Whether or not the bank has a handle on inflation remains to be seen. Tesco, the largest retailer in the country, the largest grocery retailer in the country, is saying that inflation is in fact falling on its shelves. Oil has rallied very, very slightly. The traders are looking at China and thinking maybe something's going to come out of there. And gold, a hawkish Fed, but it did pause, and this kind of uncertainty is helping gold very, very slightly, but a long way to go before it gets into the record books. That is the global view this morning.
Real quickly, I'd like to talk to you about this collaboration Twitter is now trying to have with traditional media. I thought the same Twitter was trying to denigrate traditional media. What is going on here?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
This collaboration Twitter is trying to have with traditional news gathering sites. I thought the essence of Twitter was to disrupt the traditional news gathering sites. So why all of this now?
The collaboration between. I'm still not quite with you.
Twitter and traditional. Twitter wants to take news from traditional news sites.
Yeah, I see. Yes.
So I thought Twitter was there to disrupt and denigrate traditional news sites.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Sorry to be dim. Yeah, of course, I get you. I think what they're trying to do is what wants Twitter to be is the internet of everything in lots of ways, and the social media that you'll go to for news, that you'll go to for movies, you'll go to everything. And this is why I think what he's thinking is, and again, Ms. Yacarino, who's come in from the big media company, will probably be saying to herself, maybe this is the way forward for Twitter, because like it or not, it does have a big customer base, and the way to get through that, of course, any media person will tell you, distribution is the first thing. So yes, I think it will disrupt, but it's going to have to tread very, very carefully indeed. I mean, the world is not the benign sort of town hall meeting that I think Twitter probably and Facebook certainly expected it to be when it was founded. It's full of people who wish to promote themselves for good or bad, and you know they got to cope with that. But I think what they're trying to do, I think this collaboration is to get into the news business. I think that's what they're doing.
All right, so talk about the Anthony Blinken's visit to China, meeting with the foreign minister, King Kang, and conversations around that. What analysts or spectators are wondering if this would help to simmer down the tensions between the U.S. and China. Others are wondering, is the U.S.'s interest now in, extending a hand of friendship or perhaps opening conversations with China, is it sincere? Is anything going to come out of, this 2-day visit? I was watching the video earlier on, and I thought it was quite instructive to see that when they posed in front of their respective flags, it was King Kang who extended his hand to shake, and Blinken almost missed that moment and then shook his hand. And I thought it was quite symbolic of perhaps a hand of friendship to send a message that they are in conversations and perhaps going to begin to maybe work better together, China and the US. What's your take on this? Is it really sincere, this visit?
You never know. I think we're at the moment, until we hear anything concrete about what the discussions are, we're down to body language, aren't we? And I as you know, I'm a firm believer, I think most of the world is, in talking rather than, shouting. And I think that any meeting between these two is probably quite a good idea. Whether anything will come of it, I'm not quite sure. But clearly, the agreement to meet from both sides, particularly from China's side, I feel it can only be seen as a positive way forward. Let's be glass half full about this, shall we? And when world leaders actually get together on the world stage, you expect something constructive to come from it. They're not going there because they want to freeze relations. They're going there probably, I suspect, to warm them up very, very slightly. But I think we're down to reading body language in the same way that you just have.
Well, which is precisely the point. The approach of U.S. and its allies to China appears to be really contradictory. Tim Cook has visited, Jim Dimon has visited, Bill Gates has also been there, Elon Musk has been there, and now Anthony Blinken is also visiting. But at the same time, AstraZeneca is pivoting away from mainland China and going to Hong Kong and Shanghai. Other businesses are following suit, and I just find the whole thing rather contradictory. But in any case, I wanted to ask you about the UK. Banks are being told to wait a while with mortgage rate increases. This, much is expected this week. But at the same time, Treasury is saying there will be no house loan help for families in the United Kingdom, because that would then force inflation up and force Bank of England to increase rates. So what kind of help do you think really the Chancellor is promising if Treasury is saying you can't use taxpayers' money to help anybody with mortgage?
The kind of help that you will hear from no politician, because it's an unpopular message, is self-reliance, really. I mean, people just have to dig deeper, that's all. And if they're going, they have to be responsible about their borrowing, and they have to maybe reduce their household costs. I don't think any government would help in a particular kind of way to give outright subsidy like that. I mean, it may happen in an authoritarian state like China, for example, but it certainly wouldn't happen in a democracy, because that's not what it's about. If you're helping people who've got mortgages, what about the people who don't have mortgages and live in state accommodation, which they don't own but merely rent from the council? So you can't do that. I mean, it just that simply doesn't work. So I suspect the message is going to be one of relative hardship. But is it really hardship? Is it really hardship, or is it just actually cutting some of the expenditure, perhaps on holidays, that people might want to do and now find themselves unable to do that? I'm not drawing lessons from it. I'm merely saying that would be my message as a person in the street, as a politician. I'd be trying to gloss it over and say, don't worry, things will get better. I'm not convinced about that. As you know, I'm not convinced that the Bank of England has much control over this. And I don't like the fact that we are being dictated to by a war started by Russia, which seems to have increased prices. I don't think that's correct. I feel as though a central bank ought to have a handle on it, and it doesn't seem to have one at the moment.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you very much indeed. Now, for business updates across the African continent, Rochus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rochus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Aya. Good morning, all our viewers. So they are starting off with the Central Bank of Nigeria, putting out a circular just yesterday, giving more guidance on, there you see their letters to deposit money banks, further guidance on operational changes to foreign exchange. They're trying to, this is all about capital controls and loosening capital controls in order to encourage more FX inflows into the country. So if we take a look at some of the things, some of the highlights that they're there. All visible, invisible transactions are eligible for the I&E window. So, business travel allowance, personal travel allowance, medicals, and so on and so forth. The applicable I&E rates is what is going to be used. So we're in the 600 levels. That's what is going to be used to access that. Then telegraphic transfers, basically international transfers coming in, up to $10,000 daily. And then also prior to, earlier there were some restrictions on cash deposits into your DOM account.
5,000.
Yeah, it was exactly. So there was a month, some weekly, they moved back and forth on that. Now they've removed that completely. So that is hopefully going to encourage more FX inflows, especially from the diaspora. That brings in about $20-something billion, 2021 per year into Nigeria. So, that's from the central bank. Further to that, we've also got some news. Bill Gates he had an exclusive interview with This Day newspaper. And by the way, congrats to Mr. Ifeni, by the way, once again. This Day newspaper had an exclusive interview with Bill Gates a couple days ago, I think on Friday or so, where he says he'll be here on Wednesday. He wants to talk to innovators in the healthcare sector. He wants to talk to folks in technology. He wants to, catch up on things that have been going on. He talked about in the interview, and I encourage everybody to read it. He talked about how Nigeria's greatest asset is its youth, and that the government powers that be should make sure that there's an environment for the youth to thrive. He talked about human capital development and particularly healthcare. They also mentioned agriculture as well. Forbes has, according to their latest, if we move to, and Bill Gates, by the way, where's Bill Gates on the richest list? I think it's number 6 now, number 7 globally. But Forbes has put out a new, the new rich list. Well, not really a new rich list. Basically, they have their index, which basically is updated daily as stock prices move. So Johanna Rupert, according to Forbes, is now the richest man in Africa. And he, of course, has been in a number of businesses. He famously founded Rand Merchant Bank, I think back in 1979. He comes from a very big lineage of business. Yeah, his father was into tobacco and so on. So yeah, his company is Compagnia Finance or so registered, which is if you buy a Mont Blanc bag or a Cartier wristwatch, you're making him more wealthy. So he started in financial services, he studied economics and completely pivoted over to luxury goods now. So his net worth as of Friday is as of Friday the 16th is 12 billion. According to Forbes and their index, Dangote's net worth is now 10.7. Now here's the thing. A lot of the wealthy people in Nigeria took a hit with the exchange rate moving because their prior calculation using their net worth was at the 470s. You move that to 660 now, that's like a 30% reduction. And you also have to look at bank balance sheets, capital adequacy ratios, and how all those things will be calculated with the movement in FX. But of course, if you're holding on to that as an asset, then you are pricing that upwards. So there's that balance there. So that's there. I mean, so that's for Mr. Rupert. And then there was a report that was put out from the FSI and the Food Security Information Network talking about very recently, hopefully we'll talk to the director later today, about the number of people facing food crisis. 258 million now as of 2022 across 58 countries. You know that Africa is severely hit by this. There's a map that they have where the African continent is just blotted with color codes with all the impact there. Their projection for this year, I think, is about 152 to 154 million as far as the number of people that are going to be impacted for 2023. And then looking at the African continent, there's a body called the IGAD, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, and it contains about 8 countries, mostly in the Horn of Africa: Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan. And they are looking at about 55 million people that are facing serious food insecurity, 55 million for 2022. Their projection is 30 million for 2023. The 3 main triggers that have been heightening food insecurity are, of course, war and armed conflict. There was a terrorist attack in Uganda over the weekend, killed at least about 25 people. Also, economic shocks. You're looking at what happened with COVID. The war in Ukraine could also fall into the armed conflict, but also falls into economic shocks. And then climate change and that impact. So, and I think Gates is going to be talking about food security when he talks about agriculture as he gets here. So that's our updates for the African continent.
Interesting stuff. A lot of those reforms kicking in, yes, to be able to get more forex.
Okay, the CBN, yeah.
Yeah, with the CBN. I mean, because when you look at those caps, also, I would like to see the caps on using your Naira debit card abroad.
Right. That should be priced upwards.
That should be priced upwards. That has also been tremendously capped for a while. So let's see how all of this kick in. But also, while we're doing all of this, let's not also forget, and this is my grouse, I'm not seeing, because a lot of people, you see, the problem in Nigeria is it's so difficult to have nuanced conversations.
Yeah.
When you say, this is good, but he should do this, they say, no, you're against it.
Right.
I'm not against the reforms of President Tinubu. But all I'm just saying is you can't just switch from a hitherto very government-dependent country to a capitalist country overnight without putting those, structural reforms in place.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Just like a lot of people say, you were against removal of... I was not against removal of foreign subsidy. I said here constantly, and I campaigned that if he did it, I'll support him.
Yeah.
But he removed it without fixing the structural issues in place, and that's just my grouse. I mean, look at what's happening in Angola. Protest already.
Yep.
But what I'm saying as regards this is, please, hope when all of this happened, we have enough to be able to defend, because at some point we still have to defend our currency. Let's not deceive ourselves.
So you defend less since you're floating it. So you won't have to.
So when the shit when stuff hit the fan,
yeah.
blah, 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 blah. Sorry, blah, blah, blah. we'll still have to defend it one way or the other.
Yes.
And hope we have the enough structure put on ground to be able to defend it. That's just my grouse. And that's just what I'm saying. When the international reality hits in, as regards subsidy removal, and international forces make our currency forex rate jack up, and the price of petrol will have to go up, hope we'll have enough in the arsenal to be able to defend it. That's what I'm talking about, structural thing.
I get you.
So moving on from that, it's already happening. You can see Dangote lost some of his worth. And I think hitherto he had even lost, because I think his worth used to be close to about 20 billion.
Then 16 billion. And Bloomberg still has him at 16, but Forbes is...
So he's lost some of his worth. But most importantly, I'd like to see how Bill Gates can come and, interact with our innovators here. We have a lot of them on board. And once we get that foreign capital coming, then we could be able to innovate and iterate new ideas in the meditech sector.
Oh, yes.
Because there's a lot we can still do in the meditech sector. And I'm just excited. I just want to see this country blossom, because I think Nigeria is green and it will do well.
Amen to that.
Let me start. Oh, you're going to say something?
No, I just said amen to what Rufai said.
So Bill Gates coming to Nigeria, excellent. I think it's quite timely that he's coming in just as we've elected a new president. I'm thinking he might want to have conversations with him, because he would traditionally want to work with the government of the day in, effecting his changes. He was in China just last week, and I met with President Xi Jinping as well. So it's great, but also very...
He's also going to Niger as well. Niger. He's also going to Niger.
So that's excellent. I mean, if you look at his antecedents and his involvement in Nigeria, he's given significantly, particularly in the fight against malaria
and polio.
And he highlighted it in that interview by this day, where he talked about the fact that Nigeria has now been declared polio-free. And we're looking forward to Nigeria being declared malaria-free as well, especially with the significant amount of money that has been pushed into that sector. Indeed. He also spoke about accountability, and one of the things that they'll be having conversations around. Even though, yes, you may say, he's the second richest in the world.
Well,
sixth richest in the world. Therefore, he has money to throw around, in quotes. But they still want to see that the monies that are being expended is being used, for the most vulnerable and for the projects. The thing with not-for-profit organizations is that a significant amount of money received by donors is used for administrative costs, used for, servicing the organization, and perhaps not even directly targeted. And this is what funders more and more are looking to doing, to ensure that the money is being used for what it's supposed to. They have very tight, evaluation processes or monitoring processes. And then in terms of the the report by FSIM,
crisis,
one of the things that I think chapter 1 starts with timely intervention, saving lives. And they talked about the fact that countries where they have the food insecurity is propelled by catastrophe, it's because usually these countries don't plan ahead. And Nigeria was cited as one of the countries in terms of the top in the world. And it goes back to what you're saying, Rufai, in terms of palliatives for things like fuel subsidy removal. It's not a catastrophe, but it goes back to planning ahead rather than being reactionary. And what we're hopeful is that this government would actually look ahead, not wait for things to happen, not wait for things to hit the roof before they begin to put in policies. Before they begin to put in policies to address this. So it was identified actually as one of the key issues for a number of countries who were facing food insecurity. Just lack of planning, improper planning, and a knee-jerk reaction to things occurring. So, that ought to be said. I'm looking forward to us moving up that index. We've been on that mountain for too long in terms of food insecurity, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to subside anytime soon. And finally, I think luxury goods is the way to go. First was Bernard Arnault with LVMH, and now we have Johan. But I think Nigerians will protest. Where is Dangote?
Dangote is second place according to Forbes.
The currency.
We'll see. Yeah, the currency, the valuation.
Let me start with Bill Gates.
Bill Gates,
I saw the story, Bill Gates saying why I'm optimistic about Nigeria. And his main point is that Nigeria has enormous potential for growth because of the talent that it has, the resources at its disposal. At a time when many Nigerians are giving up on their own country, it is important, it is enheartening to see a man like Bill Gates saying, I'm optimistic about Nigeria. And I hope that message will resonate with many of the young people that you will be meeting with on June the 21st, when the Techno Hub in Lagos and the Lagos Business Group will be organizing, an interaction with Nigerian youths and Mr. Gates on the issue of technology and innovation. Well, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is in about 49 African countries. And they opened an office in Nigeria as far back as 2012. And the foundation has done a lot of work in terms of agricultural production, gender equality promotion, and also fighting tuberculosis, polio, and all of these diseases. And one point that Mr. Gates raised when he visited in 2018 is about accountability, management of resources. And I hope that will be a message again that he will need to reiterate this time around as he meets with the young people and as he meets with President Tinubu, because that's part of the agenda. He and Alhaji Dangote are supposed to meet with President Tinubu. But the bigger point for me is the fact that despite challenges that we face in this country, we have a not-for-profit foundation like Bill and Melinda Gates still showing interest in Nigeria and encouraging the country. That example is worthy of emulation, coming straight from China to Nigeria. Now, that's that. About the operational guidelines for the foreign exchange market. Two major operational guidelines within a space of 4 days. The first one was on June 14, when we were told about the harmonization. And then this follow-up on June 18, after an extraordinary bankers committee meeting. And I looked at the measures that have been introduced, and I asked myself, this bankers committee, have they not always been there? Okay, are they some kind of robotic group of men and women who just follow the tide as it flows? Were they not the same people who supported and upheld the previous regime that has now been redefined? But the bigger advantage of this, as we've been told, is that it will encourage equity. It will encourage openness. It will address the problem of supply of forex that we talked about earlier on, after the operational guidelines of June 14. Okay, so, and now everything can go to the I&E window, both visible and invisible, transactions. Everybody will now have access, so there's increased access. But many of these policies, until they are tested, you really don't know the impact.
Exactly.
So it's when this new set of measures are tested that you can know the impact. However, one of the things that the CBN put out, which may seem controversial, is that they're saying those 41 items on the banned list, that they remain.
Right.
But if you look at those items, well, to encourage local production, rice, cassava, yam, fish, roofing sheets. Okay, I can't list all 41. But there are persons, financial experts, economists, who insist that, look, that import prohibition list is the CBN overstretching itself to create its own trade policy, going to the trade policy space, instead of leaving that, to those at the fiscal end of it. But the CBN has made it clear that that list, would subsist. Well, as for Alhaji Dangote no longer being the richest man, well, I don't know. He's still the second richest man in Africa.
According to Forbes.
I worry more about the hit that you and I are taking.
Yes, so
the savings
our own pockets
that have been wiped out. And as the organized labor meets with the federal government today, I think that's top of the agenda.
Indeed.
They are going to go there and ask for increase in minimum wage.
Yes.
Okay, so I worry more about that than how billionaires make their money and who is number one, who is number 6.
Well, billionaires create jobs.
But they will always make money.
Yes.
They will always make money for the benefit of the common good, right?
Right, well.
I bought fuel. All of this started for the first time yesterday.
Accept my congratulations.
Rufai drives a big car. You tell us the car you drive.
In fact, by the time you use that tank of fuel for 2 days, you will see that you will go back again.
When I bought it,
Yes.
what just came to my head was income bear.
Fuel has become gold.
It's become gold.
That's the one that concerns me.
The same money,
billionaires can keep making their money.
that almost filled my tank before could not even buy me 20 liters again.
It's almost 3 times the amount now. It had to happen. We wasted time. We kicked the can down the road. This had to happen. So
No, but I do think that Alhaji Dangote being number one almost feels like it's Nigeria. So it's our thing. So it's that sense of aspiration and the fact that we're still leaders in this on the African continent.
government make it worth our while. Though. This suffer must not be in vain. Though. Do for people too.
Yeah,
I beg you.
It's okay. Help rich people celebrate their money. Thank you, Rotis.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. What's next?
All right, so the 30th anniversary and annual meeting of the African Export-Import Bank enters day 2 today in Accra, Ghana. A RISE correspondent Nkechi Nana reports from Accra.
African leaders are gathered in Accra, Ghana for the Afrexim Bank 30th annual meetings, kicking off with a bold step, the launch of Afrexinsure, an insurance management services company established to reduce generational trade and infrastructure deficit.
In the context of the 120 billion and 100 billion annual trade and infrastructure financing gap, respectively, adding insurance to the group's portfolio will help ensure the availability of financing. It will help de-risk large products and crowding investment required to develop the infrastructure networks necessary for development of trade and commerce across the continent.
After that, remarks were delivered by financial leaders across Africa.
Since its establishment 3 decades ago, Afrexim Bank has transitioned into a first-class supranational financial institution, championing African trade and driving growth across multiple sectors in Africa. Afrexim Bank has also had a good working relationship with us at the Bank of Ghana and facilitated foreign exchange swap arrangements with banks in Ghana to boost foreign exchange liquidity support for Ghana's international trade.
In this regard, we have to applaud the bank for its efforts and achievements during 2022 in developing and implementing new solutions to alleviate the negative repercussions from global shocks on the continent.
The partnership with Afrexim Bank is so critical. And I know that my colleagues in the African Union, in the overall family of the African Union, Ambassador Muchanga is here, CEO Nados is here. All of us in the African Union depend on Afrexim Bank for your support, for your wisdom, and of course to make sure that as Africans.
Then came the plenary sessions, beginning with turbocharging implementation of the AFTA and the bold steps needed for its actualization. Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, had a fireside chat on the importance of the ease of travel and trade across the continent.
So what I keep saying is that yes, AFCTA is the greatest idea. It will help to grow all our economies. It will create massive amount of jobs. Most of these youth that we have that are littering around, they will be able to have jobs. But we have to cooperate. We have to make sure that, things move. I don't want to now be in a position where I used to be, because right now I have the African passport. But the African Union passport allows you to move around, even though there are about 2-3 countries that are not agreeing up to now. I don't know why. But you see, if I have to get a visa to get into country A as an African, and now we go with a British guy or maybe a Nigerian, it has happened to me, a Nigerian holding British passport, he was allowed in, and arguing, debating about my visa. And I'm the one, and I'm the one with the money.
Can you imagine?
Yes.
Can you imagine?
So I think what maybe African countries they need to do is that why don't you give Africans visa on arrival? That will facilitate trade.
Yes.
If you are making life difficult for me, there's no way I'll go and invest.
The theme of the day was echoed by other corporate leaders.
Where the genius of transformation will come from is what Afrexim Bank is doing, is what you are doing. What you're doing is working, and what you're doing, combining demography with productivity. If we do not combine demography with productivity, we will not get the kind of transformation, we will not unlock the genius. And what I learned from AGOA is going to take market access. It's going to take the power of examples. It's going to take the kind of commitment that many of you are doing. It's going to take connections. It's going to take the global approach. It's going to take mobilizing resources.
Food security is a concern for political and development leaders. So, what does the continent need to feed itself? This was on the front burner.
The Food and Agriculture Organization's 2022 report on the state of food security and nutrition in the world estimates that around 2.3 billion people, nearly 30% of the global population, were moderately or food insecure in 2021, and as many as 828 million people were affected by hunger. What are African leaders, politicians, technocrats, and NGOs doing to mitigate against these challenges that threaten our food security? The focus of the agriculture sector should therefore include having modern agricultural technology for increased productivity and production, having environmentally sustainable and climate resilient economies and communities, and well-informed citizenry and skills development, which is underpinned by science, technology, and innovation. We also need to acknowledge and embrace our own indigenous knowledge systems. We need to produce nutritious food crops, reduce the consumption of chemically laden food crops, and produce herbal products to cater for the well-being of our citizens, and also make skills development in agriculture fashionable to young people, and never, ever leave women behind.
Today's sessions highlighted the need for interconnectedness of the African continent, focusing on trade, food, and security. However, what a prosperous Africa looks like also involves promoting culture, arts, and literature.
If you can, for instance, translate not just what is being produced now, but history, even scientific subjects, you translate them, you have one common language, you're already producing more material of teaching, of enlightenment, which is very good for the economy. It's good for printers, it's good for booksellers, it's good for bookshops, it's good for the writers also. Your royalties increase just a little bit. And so all these various factors guided or sort of influenced our decisions at that time. But there's no question at all in my mind, and I'm sure you agree with this, that language itself is an instrument, not just of livelihood. It's also of struggle, it's a language of economics, it's a language, it's an instrument of science, of teaching, of understanding. It even affects the human psyche, which means it also affects the collective psyche, binds people together or separates people.
And that was day one of Afreximbank's 30th anniversary and annual meetings. Day two promises a refreshing of Afreximbank's vision. Nkechi Nana, Arise News, Accra.
Well, thank you very much, Nkechi, for that update. We have the Afreximbank. It's the 30th anniversary, and the focus is on prosperity for Africa, delivering the vision, prosperity for Africa. Great highlights. Today, one of the highlights, of course, would be the keynote speech by the President of Ghana, who is also hosting this 30th anniversary meetings. Rufai.
All right. A lot has been said. Happy 30th anniversary to Afreximbank. And big kudos to the likes of Olusegun Obasanjo, that saw the need for this, pushed it many years ago. The fact that we need banks, to be able to develop our African prospect. The AFDB is doing this, Afreximbank is doing that. As regards a lot of transactions across the African continent, and it's ably being championed and led now by Professor Benedict Orama. And we can see the effects on the lives of many African deals. And what the African Bank is saying as regards this is, how can we turbocharge Africa to the next millennium? And all of this the African Bank does is in consonance with that great dream of 2063, how Africa can evolve. Because by 2063, it's going to be 100 years since Organization of African Unity started, when the likes of Osagyefo, Kwame Nkrumah, and some other great African leaders came together in 1963 to start the Organization of African Unity. And what is it? If we come together, if we collaborate, then we can increase the prospect of Africa plus board. One particular conversation I'm really excited about is the system set up by the Afrexim Bank called PAPS. You know, that payment system that once you make a payment in your local currency, the other person or the other can get a payment in their local currency. Because inter-African trade has always been a problem. When you look at the percentile, it's quite very small. And Africa should trade more amongst themselves. I once had the chance to talk to another great African billionaire, Strive Masiyiwa. And he said in that forum, when he was telling us then, he said that former leader, and vice president and deputy leader then in Zimbabwe, Thomas Nkomo, Nkomo used to tell them that, Strive, you guys don't travel enough. Travel among yourself in Africa. You're so quick to go to the West, but go amongst yourself. And the question is, how well do we even know our continent? Yeah. How well? How many Africans have said, okay, I've gone to XYZ African country?
We have visa issues.
Because we have visa issues. Because we have to travel abroad before we can interrelate, and all of that. Because there are no even clear routes to some African countries. There's no frequency of flights. But if we start to break all of that, then we can do a whole lot more. I feel if we can come together, if we can have that level of solidarity, there's a lot that we can do. We need to emancipate ourselves from that colonial mental slavery that broke us apart, that divided us across border, because Africa never had borders. We had a country, we had ethnic groups that span across board. Look at the Akan people and the Bali people in Ivory Coast, Akan from Ghana. Look at the synergy. Look at the fact that most people in Ivory Coast speak Tree, just like in Ghana, but the lingua franca is different, English and French. So we need to collaborate and we need to do a lot more. And I'm happy that conferences like this are happening, to be able to stretch it on the African continent. I understand we have Nkechi. Do we have Nkechi waiting on the other side? Okay, Nkechi, give us a quick brief of what happened yesterday, Nkechi. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Rufai. Good to have you. Yesterday was the beginning of the Afrexim Bank's 30th anniversary and also its annual meeting for 2023, and so many things happened. It's running on the theme of delivering Africa's prosperity, building prosperity, and also delivering the vision of Afrexim's bank. And what's that vision? It's just generally an overarching intention to ease intra-Africa trade and trade-related matters in Africa. And I just talking about how we need to remove that colonial mentality that we have in Africa, and how these conferences are very, very important, and resonated with me yesterday during the fireside chat, and also the panel that they had, implementation of AFTA, the importance of looking inward to Africa. Enough saying we're looking back straight. Oh, this happened to us. This is why we're not prosperous. And just looking toward Africa, the ease of doing business in and around Africa, the ease also steps that we need to take to make AFTA work. This is one of the things that I'm talking about. Really on difficulty of getting visa. All right. Africa.
Excellent. Well, Nkechi, the audio is, we're having slight challenges hearing you very clearly. We would have loved to ask what we're expecting today. We talked about the fact that we have the President of Ghana giving a keynote speech in the next 2 hours. And then also we have a panel with heads of government or heads of states across African countries, which I think would be quite a high-powered panel, having this conversation on building prosperity for Africans. I don't know if you can, give us a few insights into the highlights for today. What should we be expecting?
Well, you just mentioned what we're expecting. It's a packed day. We have over 12 Africans coming in today, and security is tight. TSA security has nothing on what's going on at the venue here at the Accra International Conference Center. We also have leaders coming And from the Caribbean, we have the Prime Minister of Barbados, who will be leading a panel on the unified vision to